On this episode of Newt's World, my guest today is former White House press secretary and very good friend, Sean Spicer. These days, he's a very business person. He's just been appointed to the board for the US Naval Academy by President Trump. He's co-host of the popular show, The Morning Meeting, along with Mark Halperin and Dan Turrentine on the Two-Way platform. He hosts his own podcast, The Sean Spicer Show, and has just recently launched his Substack. In fact, he's so in demand, I'm delighted that he would make the time just to join us. Sean, thank you, and once again joining me on Newt's World, but I'm really grateful you take the time.
You ask, I come. That's how it works.
And by the way, congratulations on the president appointing you to the board of the Naval Academy. I mean, that has got to be a really solid sense of something you spent your whole lifetime doing to serve the country.
Thank you. And there's obviously a bit of poetic justice in that. I talked to the president about this the other night. As people may recall, on the way out the door, it was funny when I left the White House, they had asked, do you want to do anything? And I had said, I'll serve on the board of the Naval Academy. There wasn't an opening at the time, so they put me on the White House Fellows Commission. Eventually, one of the Obama people's term was up, and they named me to a new term. And then when Biden came in, I resigned from the White House Commission on Fellows, because that's what you do. It's a White House Commission. And on September 1st, midday, I get a text, or an email rather, from the director of personnel for the Biden White House and said, at 6:00 tonight, either you will resign or we will fire you from your term. The Naval Academy, I said, no, you can fire me if you want. And then America First Legal, the outside group that Stephen Miller had founded, called me a couple days later and said, would you be willing to put your name on a lawsuit saying that Biden didn't have the right to do that? Myself and Russ Vought, the current OMB director, were the only two people that agreed to do that. Remember, he fired everybody. Naval Academy, West Point, Air Force. So we filed this lawsuit. You'll love this because this is the best part about it. The media kept saying we were going to lose the lawsuit. And sure enough, we lost the lawsuit. And for those people listening on audio, I do that in air quotes because my term was going to end in 59 days. Now, I'm no legal scholar, but I don't see the court adjudicating a lawsuit like that in 59 days. We went up to the appeals process. The Biden administration continued to argue that they had every right to fire anyone they wanted. And the court affirmed that at the appeals level. So once again, the media said Spicer and Vought lost the lawsuit. Well, here's the bitter irony. When Donald Trump comes in, he just starts firing everyone. Now, this is what I love about the story. I get a call like 5 Fridays ago, and it's a Washington Post reporter. And he says, Mr. Spicer, I wanted to know if you had any comment about the Kennedy Center. I said, why? What do you mean? He said, well, President Trump has fired everyone from the Kennedy Center. I said, okay, good for him. I'm glad he did it. And he said, have you not seen their response? And I said, I follow a lot of people on Twitter, but I don't follow the spokesman for the Kennedy Center. And he said, oh, well, let me tell you then. The spokesman said that they have no recourse because of Spicer v. Biden. And now, look, as a guy whose legal experience spans watching all the versions of Law and Order, there was something kind of cool about literally being like, holy smokes, they're literally citing a case. The Kennedy Center folks, they wrote this subsequent Washington Post story a couple days later that said, why can President Trump do what he's doing? Because of Spicer v. Biden. They keep trying to outdo Trump. They go after him to kick him off the ballot. It backfires. They fire all the people who were Trump supporters. And remember, just for context, I left this part out, unfortunately. Never before in the history of the United States has anyone from the service academies been dismissed without cause. And even then, we couldn't find it. So when Biden did this, it was wholly unprecedented. So they created this mess. And when Trump goes around and fires everybody, just remember, for all of you who want a little ammo to your leftist uncle or cousin, it was Spicer v. Biden. Biden did this for the first time in history, firing people. And so if you want to blame somebody for what Trump is doing, blame Joe Biden.
That's great. That's also a great personal story.
It's just fun because sometimes, when this lawsuit came about, I thought to myself, I was still serving in the military. It probably wasn't the smartest military officer move in the world to put your name. Now, granted, I was a civilian, so just to be clear, people in the military still talk and they see it. But at the end of the day, I did it because it was the right thing to do. What he did was wrong. And obviously, it was really bittersweet when the president called me a couple weeks ago and said, hey, I'm reconstituting this. I'm honored to put you back on. And you look at the names that are on there, right? Congressman Derek Van Orden, Navy SEAL, Ronnie Jackson, congressman from Texas, who's his physician, one-star admiral. And then it's like, and Sean Spicer.
Wow, but talk for a minute about your own military service. I mean, it's not like you wandered in from the Rotary Club.
Yeah, I've served 26 years in the Navy, but a CO and an officer in charge, depending on the unit. I graduated the US Naval War College, have a master's in strategic and national studies. So, I mean, I've served for over 26 years, commanded some pretty decent sized units, have a nice little salad on my chest of awards that I've been honored to receive. So I've done my time, but there's a lot of stiff competition for boards like this in terms of graduates who have gone on and done great things, who have served the country, and obviously want to go back to the alma mater. I didn't graduate from the academy. I graduated from the War College, but it's a huge honor. I know how many people asked the president to be nominated, and I greatly appreciate him reappointing me to that position.
I'm curious because you've got a unique perspective, having been in the White House. And I remember at times seeing you when I would visit and you'd be in the middle trying to get ready for the press corps. What do you think about the level of change that Karoline Leavitt has brought to bear on the White House press corps?
Absolutely phenomenal. There's a few things. One, like I told the president this, by the way, the other day. I said, man, I'm sure whatever decision-making process you went through to pick her, it was well worth it because she has done a phenomenal job. She has a ton of poise and leadership at the podium, commands attention, really has a command of the issues as well. And so I think she's doing a phenomenal job. But to go in and shake it up, remember, when I was White House press secretary, I brought in Skype. So I allowed reporters from around the country that couldn't be in D.C. to ask questions on the screen. And that time, they went nuts. They said this is unprecedented, ridiculous. And my point was I wanted ideas, issues, like I got asked about water rights and federal land use and issues that would never come up in the briefing because all they cared about was Michael Flynn and Russia. But my point was I wanted, A, to do that, to give local reporters an opportunity, but B, also to infect the briefing room with issues that real Americans care about that might not make it to Washington. And what Karoline has done by bringing in more new voices is absolutely phenomenal and well-timed. And then the idea of also shaking up the White House pool. What people don't understand is that the White House establishment left-wing legacy wants to control what you see, read, and hear every day. And so they do these pool reports, which means the Oval Office or Air Force One are obviously small areas. So they choose 13 people. And there's a print reporter, a radio person, a TV person, a wire person. They go in, they capture what the president says or does through their lens and then report back out to their other thousands of colleagues. This is what happened, right? So they decide what's important. They add color, right? So the president was doing this. This is what happened. They decide what the mood was. It was tense. It was fractured. I mean, whatever it is. And then they tell everyone. So if I get to be the arbiter of what you see, read, and hear, then I control the narrative. And what Karoline has done is open that aperture up, allow more voices to go in and be part of the pool. So not cut it back, just to be clear, actually grown it. So now you have the same New York Times and Washington Post, but you've got an additional person. It's almost like an additional witness to a crime scene. Now they get to hold them accountable and say, actually, the president was jovial. He was excited. He was bouncing off the walls to announce this program. But there's now a degree of accountability that there hasn't been in the past. If I can, I want to tell you one really interesting inside baseball story because this shows you the power of the White House correspondents. When we won in 2016, there was a group of us that met with them in New York at Trump Tower. And they said to us, here's how the briefings work. You will get up, you will give your opening statements, the president's schedule, whatever you want to say. And then you will start by calling on the Associated Press. The front row, who they decide who sits where. It's the wires, the Associated Press, Reuters, the New York Times, NBC, ABC. And then it kind of works backwards. And they said you will call on the Associated Press first, and then you will go down the first row. The NBCs, the Washington Post. And then if there's time, you can entertain the low-life folks in the back of the room. Bring them into the conversation. And after you've gone on for a set amount of time, the Associated Press reporter who's sitting in that seat will say, thank you very much. That signals the end of your briefing. I said, okay, thank you. So the first briefing I held on that Monday, the first person I called on was Daniel Halper, New York Post. Now, I know to most people in America, they didn't care, they didn't notice. But I did, and the faces on the folks in the front row was unbelievable. And then I went on and on and on. And at 45 minutes in, Julie Pace of the Associated Press looked up and said, "Thank you very much," signaling what they thought was the end of my briefing. I looked down and I said, "No, thank you, Julie. I'll go on. I'll tell you when my briefing's over." And I went on for another 45 minutes. And the goal there was to signal to them that you're not in charge. This is a government room. This is a government briefing. We'll decide when it's over, not you. Donald Trump's in charge now. And I think that Karoline has really, in her own way, brought a stamp to that room to make it very clear in a different way several years later that she's in charge, that the Trump administration's going to lead this agenda, not them. And I think it's phenomenal.
I went by the other day and she said, if I want to come in sometime, I can occupy the seat of the unusual member and ask a question. I said, do I have to let you know in advance? She said, no, you show up, we'll get you a seat. But at her age, her confidence is unbelievable.
And it's funny you say that because obviously we've had a lot of great entrepreneurs in this country who've done fantastic things at a young age. If we're going to be honest about this, like at 27, are you kidding me? I mean, I could not have held my own in that. I was a comms director on Capitol Hill under your tutelage when you were speaker, working for a rank and file member. I mean, I couldn't have had the poise and the command of issues that she has at that level. I don't know that I could have done it at 37.
She's remarkable.
Yeah. And it just speaks what a bright future.
I'm very impressed that every morning you guys are doing this two-way and you find interesting things to talk about. You manage to maintain a balance and it's very cordial.
What makes it unique? It streams on my YouTube channel and if people want to watch, and it's live. We take questions from anyone in the world. We gotten questions from France and China. The difference between the morning meeting and a lot of shows is that we're not trying to win you over. So when you go on cable, it's a 6 or 7 minute cable hit. I want to beat up on the opponent. I want to tell him why I'm right. Donald Trump is doing better. You guys are bad, blah, blah, blah. Dan and I, Dan being the Democrat, he worked for Hillary Clinton. He's got a ton of stature, a ton of time and grade, is that we're explaining the process. I'm not trying to win over people. If you like Donald Trump more or the Republican Party or the conservative movement more, I'm excited. I hope that I do that well. But my goal is to explain why things are happening. This is the mentality. This is the decision-making process so that people have a better understanding of their government and the process by which decisions are made and maybe how to influence them. So as you know, it's not Schoolhouse Rock, and people need to know this is really how government works, how decisions are made, how politicians think. And I think we add an element to the discussion that just doesn't exist in the ecosystem anymore or ever.
And I have to say, I find Halperin to be so widely networked that his morning newsletter is one of the first things I read every day.
Well, people trust Mark to tell them things. I joked with Mark at one point, like I spent several hours in front of the Mueller commission or whatever the heck it's actually called. And I was always impressed by how they would look and say, you know, on February 3rd, you were in a meeting. There were 4 people there. Someone exited from the right-hand side. I'm like, holy smokes. It's like Big Brother. When Halperin interviews you for, his books or whatever, he doesn't come to just ask. He comes with his A game. And he's like, look, when you were in this meeting, you coughed a few times and then you made an utterance. And he's so well sourced because people trust him that he's not going to reveal sources and that he's going to try to get the story straight. And that's very different from so many of the folks at like Politico or Axios who are just looking for clickbait.
You had mentioned working in the House when I was Speaker. Do you share my sense that what Mike Johnson's pulling off with virtually no margin is unimaginable?
Yeah. We do a thing on the morning meeting where we pick winners and losers, and all 3 of us, including Dan, the Democrat, said that the winner was Mike Johnson because you know this. It's herding cats to begin with. What he's been able to pull off without earmarks. And you remember the delay days. It was sort of like how much for your vote. That's obviously an extreme, but there are a lot more tools at the disposal politically. Now it's not that way. And so he's really instilling a sense of team that didn't exist. And that's the big difference is that people are like, I get it. Tom Massey even, who's voting against these things, isn't doing it out of spite. He's not mad at anybody. He philosophically disagrees with the vision of government. which to some degree I respect. He's not doing this because he doesn't like Donald Trump or he's mad at Mike Johnson. He's, a principled guy that sees things differently. I don't agree with him entirely, but I'm just saying I don't think that he's doing this for some kind of political gain. He's weathered the primaries before. And again, I don't agree with necessarily what he's doing, but it speaks to Johnson that he's able to keep all these people together without a bunch of carrots and sticks and browbeating them, etc. And I think the other point that I would make where it's going to benefit him is look at the Democrats where they are. They are in utter disarray. And when you talk about the Republican conference, the idea that Johnson can go to them now and say, guys, we stuck together. We were a team. And look at these jokers. They're off making paddles at arts and crafts time. And then they're mocking Schumer openly. I mean, this is not a party that has its act together. It's really rudderless.
Plus and I were sitting actually in Johnson's box for the president's address to the Congress. So we're directly above the Democrats. They couldn't applaud Trump. They couldn't applaud a 13-year-old cancer survivor. They couldn't applaud mothers and survivors. And you're getting the same thing right now. I mean, they lockstep vote no, get beaten.
Yeah. And here's the thing is that, good begets good. If you're Johnson, you look at them and say, guys, we stuck together and look at what they did. Like, it's pathetic.
Dick Bartland called me one time in about 1983. He was Reagan's chief pollster. And he said, the most important thing is winning, because a president who wins is seen as strong. And therefore, it's easier to win the next one because he's seen as strong. And there was a lot to that. I mean, I didn't fully appreciate it at the time because we were fighting over taxes. But they did win, and I think Trump has a similar knack. In his case, I think he has, ironically, vastly more intense prestige than Reagan did. He doesn't have as broad a prestige. The loyalty to Trump among those who like him is astonishingly deep.
The thing that I keep saying, I gave a speech earlier this week, and I said, because of 4 years out of office, I think Trump's going to be the most consequential second-term president probably ever, definitely in modern history, because the opportunity when you have one term, you just keep rolling over. If you're the press secretary on January 20th, you're the press secretary on the 21st and on the 22nd and the 23rd. And when you have ability to stop and think about what I call the 3 Ps, the people, the process, and the policies, and you go, okay, if I get to do it again, what am I going to do? Who are the people I'm going to surround myself with and keep away? 2, what are the policies that I'm going to advance and not? And then the process. What do I have to do to make sure I get my policies through? Who are going to be the opposition forces? Who are going to be my friends? What are the obstacles that we're going to face? And because of that, they have come out of the gate just killing it. And this is the difference, is that you think back 8 years ago, we didn't have a team in the House. Mark Meadows led the opposition to the repeal of Obamacare. And you had people who subsequently came onto the team and didn't do it for bad reasons, just didn't think it was the right decision. But like now, to your point, Speaker Johnson's got everybody on board. I mean, Andy Harris, the congressman from Maryland, who's the chair of the Freedom Caucus, is publicly saying, hey, I've never voted for a debt ceiling increase. I've never voted for a CR, but I'm willing to do it now. They believe in the vision. They're bought in. And I think this is just absolutely spectacular.
If Trump can sustain this, and if he can win the 26th election in the House, I think he will go on to be just below Washington and Lincoln's, probably rivaling FDR as the third most consequential president in American history. And he will have changed the government at a level that it would have been unthinkable prior to Trump.
But you know what's so funny? I fight this like on a daily basis. Trump is willing to have fights that people haven't been willing to have. Like this effort to root out government, and you know this, I mean, the Grace Commission, reinventing government, Sarbanes-Oxley, and we talk about it over and over again, and now it's happening. I just get so excited because we have allowed the excuses, and sometimes for the right reasons because you didn't have the alignment of the parties. It's not entirely because of lack of will. But this time we've got a partner that's willing to go out there and fight the fights in a way that just hasn't existed in the past.
Part of it is that he grew up in New York real estate, where people were very tough, and they fought all the time. If you read The Art of the Comeback, which is, I think, his most important book, as he explains that he almost went broke, it has the greatest opening. It says, I was $900 million in debt to the banks personally. Atlantic City was ceasing to be profitable. The Iraq campaign was leading to inflation. and my wife just called to say she wanted a divorce. He said, this is the moment when you either get depressed or you plan a comeback.
I've got The Art of the Deal. I've done that, but you're right.
The Art of the Deal is very helpful in understanding his mindset. If you watch him, for example, with Ukraine and Russia, it's straight out of The Art of the Deal.
You know what's funny, though, just from a strategic standpoint that I find hysterical? And I think you were the one who said it a long time ago to me. And so I'm just to be clear, I'm stealing it. Although, as I've learned the second time that you use it, you don't have to attribute once you.
As Sean Spicer said.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. But I think that one of the things that's interesting is that so much is there in public, meaning the book is there. The Art of the Deal is there. The Art of the Comeback is there. Go read it. And so many times when people are talking to me, I'll say, not long ago, Newt Gingrich said, it's all there in the Art of the Deal. And yet people just don't want to read it. And I'm like, it's like the playbook is staring you in front of the face. The map is there and you don't want to look at it.
Part of it is they can't believe somebody's actually like this. This is a guy who has survived recessions economically. I mean, he understands all this stuff probably as well as any president in American history. But in addition, I must say, I just read J.D. Vance's speech explaining the tariffs. It is the best, most coherent explanation I've seen so far. And it's pretty straightforward. They want manufacturing in the United States, period.
Yeah. I mean, this again goes back to this whole idea. I was talking about this in the morning meeting this morning. At some point, the easy political thing, the absolute easiest, is Trump just to kick it down the road, to say, you're right. Let's just let Canada keep high tariffs. Let's let Europe keep high tariffs. Let's just keep doing business that way so that U.S. companies don't have the same market access that they do to our market. That's the easy political answer. The hard answer is to actually do something that will result in a long-term beneficial result for the United States. Bring more jobs back, bring more manufacturing back. We're dismissing the fact that Taiwan Semiconductor, Apple, Honda's moving the Civic from Mexico to Indiana. This didn't just happen. And I don't think that people fully appreciate that, yes, it might not happen tomorrow. And if it was easy, you would just snap your fingers and say, move back, drop your tariffs. But he's right that there's not just one potential outcome. India can drop its tariffs. Canada can take its dairy tariff down and let U.S. milk flow in a lot easier. There's two sides to this coin.
This is a guy who for 13 years had a popular TV show, the essence of which was you're fired. The personality that's able to pull that off for 13 straight years, the idea that they're going to bluff him. I mean, he knows he's the biggest market in the world. He knows they need him. He doesn't need them. His comment about the Europeans went after American whiskey, so he went after European wines and champagne, and made the comment, this is going to be great for American winemakers, of which, by the way, he's one. I mean,
that didn't get lost to me either. I'm like, I believe you own one of those.
I'm particularly watching Putin and to a lesser extent Xi Jinping because Trump actually doesn't bluff.
No, he scares the crap out of them.
And at some point, my guess is in the very near future, Putin is going to decide, he announced today, that he really wants to get to a ceasefire. And of course, he's setting terms that are crazy. But again, in the tradition of New York real estate, that's where the deal starts. You tell me your insane demand, I'll tell you my insane demand, and eventually we'll get around to a deal. But he has got Putin now talking about having a truce.
Here's the beautiful thing about this. A week ago, everyone goes, why is he doing it in the way that he's doing it? Da-da-da-da. And everyone wants to focus on the process and the noise. Who's sitting where? As opposed to the outcome. If in a week from now we are sitting with a ceasefire, hopefully more than that, isn't that a good thing? That people are not dying, that destruction is not continuing. And yet but do you guys realize where Mike Waltz sat? He's supposed to sit in the seat that's 4 over, not 3 over. And that's not the tradition and the norm of how things are supposed to work. Well, how things are supposed to work hasn't worked out so well. So maybe we try it his way and actually get something out of it.
My biggest concern is the 26th election, and my biggest concern there is getting the tax cuts and the deregulation through early enough, hopefully by May June at the latest, so that they can take effect so the economy is booming by next summer. What's your sense, particularly in trying to deal with the Senate, which has very deep resistance? I mean, Johnson's on board and also understands that passing one really big bill is a lot easier with his margin than trying to pass two bills. But in addition to that, there's a time problem. Do you think in the end the Senate will go along, or what do you think's happening?
Look, I think this week is sort of like the trailer to the movie that's coming. Everybody got on board. They understand, and it's for a variety of reasons. One, to your point earlier about winning gets people excited. They go, let's win. Two, there's a bit of political scare. Part of the reason they screwed with Massey is not because they thought they could beat him in the primary. That was a tell to everyone else, stay in line or we're coming after you. And it's not just the primary, and that's where some of the media gets it wrong. You don't want to walk down the street in Louisiana or South Dakota or wherever and having all these people be like, you sold us out. It's not just about the election. It's about actually living. And I think that's important. The second thing that I will tell you, I did my first race in 1994 with you in the Contract with America in Connecticut's 2nd District. I have never seen a political operation like they're building right now. And they get it, which is, yes, we're not running for re-election, but we need to maintain the House. And therefore, the amount of money and political mechanics that is going into having the apparatus to defend and grow a House majority, I think the Senate's going to be fine. Not fine, but I think we'll actually pick up seats. I think that it is historic and monumental, and no one is seeing this coming. The Democrats are depressed. They're not excited. And not only are they putting up points on the board on the House side, but they're building the political apparatus financially and otherwise to be able to defend and grow the House majority.
Well, and you're beginning to watch Senate Democrats retire. They're creating vulnerabilities.
Whether it's Shaheen or Michigan, I think you're going to have a great race in Georgia, especially if Kemp jumps in. I don't know that he will or not, but they need to defend the Dems. You got Shaheen in New Hampshire. You got the Michigan seat. And now you've got a seat in Georgia. Ossoff's in cycle. Look, I think Republicans are in great shape in the Senate to probably grow, maybe by 1 or 2 seats. And then in the House, as long as they have points on the board and a lot of money, they'll do okay.
I understand you're talking with Karoline Leavitt, the current White House press secretary, on Friday on your show. Why don't we listen to a clip?
You know, most people don't care or know about the White House Correspondents Association. They've had a stranglehold on the White House briefing room for decades. You and your team decided to take it on. So explain why you did that and why it matters.
Yeah, well, as you know, the White House Correspondents Association is truly become a monetized monopoly over the White House and the coverage of the President of the United States in America. This is a group of journalists who have been covering the White House for decades. They started this organization because the presidents at the time were not doing enough press conferences. I don't think we have that problem anymore under this president. So the priorities of the media have shifted, especially with this new digital age. And the White House Correspondents Association has really been an exclusive group of journalists who cover this White House. They have not really welcomed other people, new media, independent journalists with open arms. And so we thought it was time to expand the coverage and determine who gets to be part of that 13-person press pool, who gets to ask the President of the United States questions in the Oval Office, aboard Air Force One. And since we have started this new process of determining the daily rotation, so many new voices and outlets who have never been part of this small and privileged group of journalists have been able to access those very unique and privileged spaces and cover this presidency. And that's very important.
And how was it to talk with Karoline about the job you used to do?
It was awesome, right? So many people interview her about what the president's views are, and I love that. But to have a conversation with her, press secretary to press secretary, was really cool.
I want to thank you. This is great fun. You're remarkably knowledgeable.
Well, I learned under the best.
Well, Reagan was a terrific teacher. I really cherish your friendship. I want to thank you for joining me. And I want to let our listeners know they can find your podcast, The Sean Spicer Show, on Apple Podcasts or YouTube. They can watch The Morning Meeting by signing up at twoway.tv. And they can follow everything you're doing at SeanSpicer.com or join you on Substack at Substack.com at Sean Spicer. And I'm just very grateful that you came on.
Always honored to be with you.
Thank you to my guest, Sean Spicer. You can get a link to his podcast, The Sean Spicer Show, on our show page at newsworld.com. Newt's World is produced by Gingrich 360 and iHeartMedia. Our executive producer is Garnsey Sloan, and our researcher is Rachel Peterson. The artwork for the show was created by Steve Penley. Special thanks to the team at Gingrich 360. If you've been enjoying Newt's World, I hope you'll go to Apple Podcast and both rate us with 5 stars and give us a review so others can learn what it's all about. Right now, listeners of Newt's World can sign up for my 3 free weekly columns at Gingrich360.com/newsletter. I'm Newt Gingrich. This is Newt's World.